It's 6 unbelievable Halloween stories that no one can explain. Story 1. The costume that came back. She opened the door and saw herself standing there, wearing the same costume she'd buried 3 years ago, October 31st, 1994, Willow Creek, a forgotten town just outside Portland, Oregon. This is where Sarah Mitchell learned that some Halloween costumes refuse to stay in the past. Any resemblance to real places or people is purely coincidental. Sarah was 23 that autumn, working at the old Riverside Diner on Main Street. She'd moved to Willow Creek to escape memories, to start fresh. But that Halloween, the past knocked on her door, literally. 3 years earlier, Sarah's younger sister Emma had died in a car accident on Halloween night. She'd been wearing a handmade scarecrow costume, burlap and straw, with a painted face Sarah had spent weeks creating. After the funeral, Sarah couldn't bear to keep it. She buried it in the woods behind their childhood home, 2 states away. That Halloween evening in 1994, Sarah was home alone in her studio apartment above the diner. Around 8 p.m., she heard 3 slow knocks. When she opened the door, her breath caught in her throat. Standing in the dim hallway was a figure in a scarecrow costume, identical to Emma's, down to the crooked smile Sarah had painted, down to the missing button on the left shoulder. The figure didn't speak. It just stood there, slightly swaying, like something hanging from a post in a field. Sarah slammed the door, her hands shaking. When she looked through the peephole, the hallway was empty. The next morning, Sarah drove to her childhood home. She went to the spot in the woods where she'd buried the costume. The ground was disturbed, freshly dug. The costume was gone, but here's where it gets stranger. Sarah's neighbor in the apartment building, Mrs. Chen, said she'd seen Sarah leave the building around 7:30 that Halloween night, wearing a strange costume. Sarah swears she never left until the next morning. The diner's owner mentioned that someone matching Sarah's description came in around 8:15, ordered coffee, and sat in silence for an hour, wearing what looked like a scarecrow costume. Sarah has no memory of this. She was home. She opened the door. She saw herself. Some say Sarah had a breakdown, that grief made her black out and act out her trauma. Others believe something else wore that costume that night, something that knew exactly which door to knock on. The diner closed in 1997. Sarah moved away. But every Halloween, residents of Willow Creek report seeing a scarecrow figure walking Main Street, knocking on doors, always 3 slow knocks, never saying a word. What really happened in that hallway? Was it grief, or was it something that understood grief well enough to use it? Think about that next time someone knocks on your door on Halloween night. Story 2. The candy that remembered. The old woman at 47 Maple Street gave out candy that tasted exactly like your childhood. The specific Halloween you wanted to forget. Fall of 1989. The fictional town of Ashford Hollow, nestled just outside Louisville, Kentucky. This is where trick-or-treating became something darker, something that knew too much. Any resemblance to real locations is coincidental. Mrs. Iris Blackwood had lived at 47 Maple Street for as long as anyone could remember. She was ancient. Her house was Victorian and rotting, and every Halloween she sat on her porch with a carved wooden bowl full of wrapped candies. Homemade, she'd say. Special recipe. Kids usually avoided her house, but that year, a group of teenagers decided to be brave. Among them was Danny Reeves, 16, trying to impress his friends. They knocked. Mrs. Blackwood smiled, her teeth too white, her eyes too knowing. She gave each of them a candy, wrapped in orange wax paper, tied with black ribbon. Danny unwrapped his in the car on the way home. It was a caramel. The moment it touched his tongue, he was 8 years old again. Standing in his grandmother's kitchen on Halloween 1981, he could smell her perfume, hear her voice, feel the weight of the plastic vampire cape she'd made him. That was the last Halloween before she died. The memory was so vivid, so real, that Danny started crying in the back seat. His friends thought he was joking, but then Amy Chen, another teen in the group, bit into hers. She tasted pumpkin pie and suddenly remembered Halloween 1985, the night her parents told her they were getting divorced. She could hear their argument word for word, as if she was standing in that kitchen again, wearing her witch costume, holding her plastic pumpkin bucket. One by one, each teenager experienced the same thing. The candy didn't just taste like something, it transported them to a specific Halloween from their past, always one tied to loss, fear, or sadness. Moments they tried to forget. The next day, they went back to 47 Maple Street. The house was empty. Not just empty, abandoned. Cobwebs, dust, broken windows. It looked like no one had lived there in decades. They asked around town. The older residents said yes, Mrs. Blackwood used to live there, but she died in 1971. No one had been in that house since, yet all 5 teenagers had the same memory. The porch light on, Mrs. Blackwood smiling, the wooden bowl of candy. They even had the wrappers, orange wax paper with black ribbon, sitting in their pockets like evidence of something impossible. Some believe it was a shared hallucination. Maybe someone spiked their drinks earlier that night. Others think 47 Maple Street is a threshold, a place where the past can reach through and remind you of what you've lost. The house was torn down in 1993, but people still report seeing a porch light flickering on Maple Street every Halloween. And some say, if you walk close enough, you can smell caramel and sadness in the air. What did those teenagers really taste that night? Memory, or something that feeds on it? Days. Story 3. The Mirror in the Haunted House. He looked into the funhouse mirror and saw himself 30 years older, holding a newspaper with tomorrow's date and his own name in the obituary, October 1998. The small town of Granger Falls, just outside Albuquerque, New Mexico. A traveling carnival set up on the edge of town, and inside the haunted house, attraction was a mirror that showed people things they weren't supposed to see. This is a fictional account. Any resemblance to real events is coincidental. Tommy Bradford was 17, cocky, fearless. His friends dared him to go through the haunted house alone on Halloween night. It was the usual setup: plastic skeletons, recorded screams, teenagers in masks jumping out. Tommy laughed through the whole thing until he reached the final room. It was a small space with mirrors on every wall, dimly lit by a single red bulb. Tommy stood in the center and looked at his reflection. But the reflection was wrong. Instead of seeing himself at 17, he saw himself as an old man, maybe 50, maybe older. The old version of him was holding a newspaper. Tommy squinted, trying to read it. The headline was visible: "Local man dies in fire." The date on the paper was November 1st, 1998, tomorrow. And in the obituary section, he could see his own name, Thomas Bradford. Tommy stumbled backward, crashing into another mirror. When he looked again, the reflection was normal. Just him, 17, terrified. He ran out of the haunted house, found his friends, told them what he saw. They went back in together. The mirror room was empty, just a bare space with no mirrors at all, only blank walls. Tommy couldn't sleep that night. November 1st came. He stayed home, refused to go anywhere, convinced he was going to die in a fire. Nothing happened. The day passed. He was fine, but 2 weeks later, Tommy's uncle, who shared his exact name, Thomas Bradford Sr., died in a house fire. The obituary ran in the local paper. The photo they used looked eerily similar to what Tommy had seen in the mirror. The same aged face, the same haunted eyes. Tommy never talked about the mirror again. The carnival left town, and no one knew where it went. But in the years since, people have reported seeing that same traveling haunted house in different towns across New Mexico and Texas. And there are stories, whispers really, of people looking into a mirror and seeing their future, or someone else's future, or a future that hasn't decided who it belongs to yet. Some say it's just a trick, projections and timing. Others believe the mirror doesn't show the future. It shows a possibility, a warning. Tommy Bradford is 43 now. He's never lit a candle, never owned a fireplace, never even used a gas stove. He's still afraid of that reflection, still afraid the mirror got the face right, but the date wrong. What would you do if you saw your own death in a mirror? Would you believe it, or would you spend the rest of your life running from a reflection? Datil. Story 4. the voicemail from 1952. She checked her voicemail and heard her grandmother's voice, asking her to come home for Halloween dinner. But her grandmother had been dead for 40 years, and it was 1996, not 1952, autumn 1996. The fictional town of Belmont, just outside Bangor, Maine. This is where Claire Donovan learned that some phone calls can reach across time, and some invitations are impossible to refuse. Any resemblance to actual places is coincidental. Claire was 28, living alone in a small rental house on Spruce Lane. She worked as a librarian and liked the quiet life. On October 29th, she came home from work and noticed the red light blinking on her answering machine. One new message. She pressed play. Static first, then a woman's voice, warm and familiar. "Claire, honey, it's Grandma Rose. Just calling to remind you about Halloween dinner on Thursday. I'm making your favorite, the pumpkin casserole. Don't be late, sweetheart. I miss you. See you soon." Claire's blood went cold. Her grandmother Rose had died in 1956, 4 years before Claire was even born. She'd only seen pictures of her, heard stories. But the voice on the machine, Claire knew it was her. She felt it, the way you know your own family's voice, even if you've never heard it before. Claire played the message again. The static was thicker this time, and behind the voice, she could hear music, big band music, the kind from the 40s and 50s. And then, at the very end of the message, a man's voice in the background, faint, saying, "Rose, who are you calling? We don't have a Claire." Claire saved the message. She called her mother, played it over the phone. Her mother went silent for a long time, then said, "That's her. That's my mother's voice." But her mother had no explanation. No rational way to make sense of it. Halloween came. Claire couldn't stop thinking about the message. That night, she decided to visit her grandmother's old house. It was abandoned now, scheduled for demolition. She walked through the overgrown yard, up the creaking porch steps. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the house was empty, stripped of furniture, just dust and shadows. But in the kitchen, on the counter, Claire found a single plate set out. On it was a serving of pumpkin casserole, still warm, steam rising in the cold air. Claire left the house and never went back. The next day, she checked her answering machine. The message was gone, erased, as if it had never existed. But her mother remembered hearing it. Claire remembered the taste of that casserole, though she swears she didn't eat it. She just stood there, staring, too afraid to touch it. Some think Claire fabricated the whole thing, a grief-induced delusion about a grandmother she never met. Others believe that on certain nights, the past can call out to the future, looking for connection, for family, for someone to come home. The house was torn down in 1997, but residents of Belmont still report hearing old rotary phones ringing in empty fields on Halloween night. And some say if you answer, you'll hear a voice you recognize, inviting you somewhere you can never go. Did Claire's grandmother reach across time, or did Claire reach back? And if you got a call like that, would you go? Nalotus's Story 5. The photographs that developed themselves. He found a disposable camera in the street on Halloween night. And when he got the photos developed, every single picture showed him in places he'd never been, doing things he'd never done. October 2001, the town of Ridgemont, just outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This is where Marcus Flynn discovered that cameras don't just capture what happened, sometimes they capture what could have happened, or what should have happened. This is a fictional story. Any resemblance to real people or places is coincidental. Marcus was 19, a college student home for Halloween weekend. On the night of October 31st, he was walking back from a party around midnight when he saw something on the sidewalk. A disposable camera, the kind you buy at a drugstore, bright yellow with black trim. It looked new. He picked it up, checked the counter. 27 pictures taken. Curious, Marcus took the camera to a 1-hour photo place the next morning. When he picked up the prints, he sat in his car and flipped through them. His hands started shaking. Every single photo was of him. Marcus, at the party he'd just left, but in the pictures, he was with different people wearing different clothes. Marcus, standing in front of a house he didn't recognize, holding keys like he lived there. Marcus sitting in a diner with an older woman who looked like his mother, but his mother had died when he was 12. Marcus at a wedding, smiling, wearing a tuxedo. Marcus holding a baby. None of these things had happened. He'd never been to that house, never been to that wedding, never held a baby. But the photos were real, printed on Kodak paper, dated November 1st, 2001, the day after Halloween. Marcus showed the photos to his friends. They all agreed it's definitely him in the pictures, no question. But none of them had taken the photos, and none of them recognized the locations or the people in the backgrounds. The strangest photo was the last one. It showed Marcus standing in front of a gravestone. He was older in this picture, maybe 40, graying hair, tired eyes. The gravestone had a name on it, Marcus Flynn. The dates read 1982 to 2019. Marcus kept the photos in a shoebox under his bed. He tried to find the locations in the pictures, driving around Pittsburgh and surrounding towns, but he never found the house, the diner, or the cemetery. It was like they existed in a parallel version of his life. In 2003, Marcus dropped out of college and moved to Oregon. He changed his number, cut ties with most people. Some say he was running from those photos, from the life they suggested he was supposed to live. Others think he was trying to avoid the final photo, the gravestone, the date. Marcus Flynn is still alive today, as far as anyone knows. But in 2019, the year on that gravestone, he disappeared from social media, stopped responding to emails. No one's heard from him since. Some of his old friends tried to find him, but it's like he vanished. What were those photos? A glimpse into another timeline, a warning, a promise. And who took them? Marcus never found the answer. The camera itself disappeared. He swears he threw it away, but his roommate claimed he saw it on Marcus's desk weeks later. The counter reset to 0, ready to take 27 more pictures. If you found a camera that showed you a life you never lived, would you look at the pictures, or would you destroy it before you saw what might have been? Digger Story 6, the trick-or-treater who wasn't there. Every house on Oakwood Drive gave candy to the same kid that Halloween. A boy in a skeleton costume who never said thank you and left no footprints. And when they checked their doorbell cameras the next day, he wasn't in any of the footage. Halloween night, 1997. The fictional suburban neighborhood of Maplewood, just outside Columbus, Ohio. This is where an entire street experienced the same impossible encounter, and no one can explain who or what they invited onto their porches that night. Any resemblance to real locations is coincidental. Oakwood Drive was the kind of street where everyone knew everyone. 30 houses, perfectly spaced, each one decorated with pumpkins and fake cobwebs for Halloween. Around 7 p.m., the trick-or-treaters started coming. Families with kids, teenagers in groups, the usual Halloween parade, but there was one kid who stood out. A boy, maybe 10 years old, wearing a skeleton costume, full body black with white bones painted on. No mask, just face paint, white skull on pale skin. He carried a pillowcase, not a plastic pumpkin. And he came to every single house on Oakwood Drive alone. The first house, the Hendersons, answered the door. The skeleton boy stood there silent, holding out his pillowcase. Mrs. Henderson dropped in some candy. The boy didn't say thank you. He just turned and walked to the next house. She thought it was rude, but didn't think much more about it. The second house, the Garcias, same thing. Silent boy, skeleton costume, pillowcase. Mr. Garcia gave him candy. The boy walked away without a word. This happened at every house. All 30 homes on Oakwood Drive. Each family gave him candy. Each family noticed the same things. He never spoke. His footsteps made no sound on the wooden porches. His eyes were dark, too dark, like there was nothing behind them. Around 9 p.m., after the trick-or-treating had died down, the neighbors started talking. They realized they'd all seen the same boy. But here's the problem. No one saw him arrive or leave the street. He just appeared at the first house and then vanished after the last one. No parents, no car, no bicycle. And Oakwood Drive was a cul-de-sac. There was only one way in and out. The next day, the Hendersons checked their doorbell camera. They just installed it that week. They rewound to Halloween night, 7 p.m. The footage showed families coming and going, kids in costumes, parents waving. But the skeleton boy wasn't there. The timestamp showed the exact moment Mrs. Henderson had answered the door and given him candy. The camera showed her opening the door, dropping something into empty air, and closing the door. No boy, no costume, nothing. The Garcias checked theirs. Same thing. Footage of an empty porch. Footage of Mr. Garcia handing candy to no one. Every house on Oakwood Drive with a camera had the same result. 30 families gave candy to a boy who didn't exist. At least not in any way a camera could see. Some think it was a mass hallucination, something in the air that night. Maybe carbon monoxide, maybe fear and suggestion. But 30 people, all seeing the exact same boy, the exact same costume, in the exact same order. Others believe something else walked Oakwood Drive that Halloween. Something that needed an invitation, needed to be acknowledged. Needed candy like a toll for safe passage. No one on Oakwood Drive saw the skeleton boy again. But every Halloween since, families on that street leave a bowl of candy on the porch with a sign that says, "Take one." And every year, by morning, one piece is always missing, even though the cameras never show anyone taking it. Who was the boy in the skeleton costume? A ghost, a memory, a test? The neighborhood doesn't talk about it much anymore, but they all remember. They all gave him candy. They all saw him, and none of them can prove he was ever there. What would you do if you opened your door on Halloween and saw something you couldn't explain? Would you give it candy, or would you close the door and pretend you never looked? What do you think really happened in these stories? Share your theory in the comments and subscribe for more stories that blur the line between reality and fear.